UFC Vegas 23, aka UFC on ABC2, aka UFC Fight Night. We have Kevin Holland versus Marvin Vettori. Boxing MMA picks. We are back giving you our main card predictions. He goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. And if you don't know boxing MMA picks by now, we are here to give you our UFC breakdown, UFC analysis, let you know which fights are worth the odds, which fights you perhaps want to avoid. A few underdog picks as well, and definitely you want to stay tuned till the end of the video so you can take a listen to who are some of our favorite picks for the entire card. Definitely looking to make everyone some money on that. Again, do all that algorithmic stuff, subscribe, like this video, share it with anyone that you know that needs some additional UFC breakdown. Let's get right into it. So we have 6 fights on our main card. Fight number 1, we have Mike Perry versus Daniel Rodriguez. Why don't you start this one off? Tell me how you feel about this one.
All right, so with Mike Perry, he's not looking good lately. He got severely outstruck by Tim Means with that jab. Mickey Gall had success in the stand-up, and Mickey Gall, we know, has no striking. He lost to Jeff Neal, finished, knocked out. Then he lost a decision to Luque. That, in my opinion, was a really close fight. That was actually the best showing that I've seen from Mike Perry in a while, right? So I'm not sure where Mike Perry's at. I'm not sure, like, as far as what I'm seeing, and as far as what I'm reading, and over the last year or so, he doesn't seem that dedicated to the arts, right? So I'm not sure where he's at. Like, I think his level of fighting, where he's at as far as how motivated he is. I think he can do well in a company like Bellator. I think he can beat that level of opposition. Now, when he's fighting UFC fighters with his motivation, I don't think he's going to do good against other fighters that are motivated. Now, when I look at Daniel Rodriguez, he to me is a motivated fighter. Now, he had a close fight against Nicholas Daukaus. That could have went either way. Aside from that fight, he's been destroying guys, right? So I think in this fight, he's going to be the better striker. I think if he wants a brawl, he can lose the fight. I think if he keeps it technical like Tim Means did, kicks out the jab, the 1-2, he has the better boxing in general, in my opinion, as far as technique goes. If he keeps it like that, he should win a easy decision, maybe a finish at some point in the fight. On Perry's end, I don't think Perry can out-technique or out-box Rodriguez outside of a knockout, outside of a one-shot kill, right? So Perry's been getting better with his wrestling, so you might want to mix up his wrestling in this fight. He is strong. He might be the stronger guy when it comes to grappling, clinching. But I'm going to go with Daniel Rodriguez. I think he's more motivated. I think he's taking it more serious at this point. I think he has a lot to prove to the UFC versus Perry, who kind of had his chance in the spotlight, and he just partied his life away. Not partied his life away, but he didn't take it that serious, right? So I'm going to go with Rodriguez being the more motivated guy in there, the better boxing, and that should be enough to win the fight.
Yeah, Daniel Rodriguez, one important thing to note with him, 4 UFC fights, 90% takedown defense. I really like what I see in his ability to stuff a takedown. Shows me really good balance in there, especially against the cage. Fighters have a real hard time getting him down. So Mike Perry, we know that he has been working on that in terms of, using that ground game more, shooting for takedowns more, introducing that aspect of his game. But I think, for the most part, Daniel Rodriguez won't have too much of a problem with that, perhaps outside of round 1. Mike Perry, to me, is a one-round fighter. I can't really trust him for all the reasons that you mentioned. In addition to what you mentioned, I'll say that his IQ, is definitely something to question. And I don't know if it's because of his cardio or if it's just because of his IQ. But simply put, Perry is somebody that I cannot trust at all. We know that they have the common opponent in Tim Means. Tim Means pieced up Perry, whereas Rodriguez, beat Tim Means via round 2 submission. I think from a blueprint perspective, Rodriguez will implement a lot of the same things that Tim Means did. The more technical striking, he'll kind of keep distance, he'll stay smart, tap, 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 point, 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 really pick them apart. I anticipate Daniel Rodriguez doing the same thing. I anticipate Daniel Rodriguez stuffing most of the takedowns. And I anticipate a tired Mike Perry maybe halfway through the second round where Daniel Rodriguez will really start to coast in this one. I don't think he knocks Mike Perry out. I mean, Mike Perry has shown a great chin. I can see Daniel Rodriguez winning a 29-28 unanimous decision on this one. So we're both in agreement there. Let's move on to fight number 2. We have Nina Ansaroff versus Mackenzie versus Mackenzie Dern. This one is tough. This one is definitely tough. Ansaroff, she's more of a point striker. Real good takedown defense, 77% takedown defense. Has a very interesting style. She doesn't really have a dominating style, but she is somebody who kind of picks up as the fight goes on. I mean, we saw her versus Tatiana Suarez, who's definitely one of the next big things in the division. She started to pick apart Suarez as that fight went on. Watch round 3 of that fight. She was able to stuff Suarez's takedowns, or at least some of them, and she was really really was able to pick her apart on the feet. If that fight had gone 2 more rounds for any reason, it would have been maybe a little bit more interesting than it turned out to be. So this fight has a lot of sort of unpredictableness to it. Mackenzie Dern, we know she's a grappling specialist. We know that she has improved hands. One thing that's very important to note with Mackenzie Dern, she can't land a takedown, right? I mean, her takedown accuracy is 6% at 0.28 per fight. But that being said, once she gets you down, she has a lot of submission attempts. She gets a lot of those submissions. We know she's a BJJ specialist, and even against other grapplers, she shows her dominance in those fights as well. This fight, to me, like I said, somewhat unpredictable. If this fight stays on the feet, will Ansaroff be able to pick her apart? Maybe, maybe not, because that's not really sort of in her MO to implement that type of dominating style. Dern has improved stand-up. I'm not saying it's better or to the level of Ansaroff, but it has been serviceable in the UFC. And then again, if she has a grappling opportunity, it could be done, right? So this one is tough. This one's very tough. This is more of a pick'em to me than Ansaroff being minus 135. And just based off of that logic alone, I'm going to go with the underdog here. I'm going with Mackenzie Dern. I see this as a 50-50 fight in some ways. I see a lot of variables in this fight. I see a lot of paths to victory for either fighter. This one's tough. But again, I'm going Dern.
Is Dern who's the favorite in that fight?
Nina Ansaroff, minus 135.
Okay. Yeah, because when you look at this fight, the concern I have with Nina Ansaroff is she had that layoff from fighting, right? She had a baby, so she hasn't fought in a while. I think this is her first fight back from having that baby, so I'm kind of concerned where she's gonna be at in this fight. But Mackenzie Dern, to me, I don't know how she's gonna get this fight to the mat, because as you mentioned, Ansaroff fought she fought the best wrestler in Tatiana Suarez, and she was doing okay in terms of trying to keep it on the feet. Suarez in my opinion, is going to be the future champ in that division. Okay, so I'm really high on Suarez. So Suarez to me beats everybody in the division with her high level wrestling. But Suarez faced a bit of resistance, but she still got her down. I don't think Mackenzie Dern has the takedowns at all. I'm going to go Nina Ansaroff. She stuffs the takedown, she wins the fight. If she's anywhere near how she was before she took the layoff because of having the child, I think she wins this fight. She beat Claudia Gadelha, Randa Marcos, Angela Hill. Those 3 to me, not Marcos, but Gadelha and Hill to me are better than Dern. So I'm going to go Nina Ansaroff, keeping this fight on the feet. Here's a funny stat. When she started out MMA, she was 1-3. And she started dating Amanda Nunes in 2012. Since she started dating Amanda Nunes, she's 9-3. And she's only lost to just Juliana Lima, Justine Kish, and Tatiana Suarez. And when she lost to Justine Kish was an undefeated fighter. It's supposed to be maybe the next big thing in the women's division. When she lost to Juliana Lima, she was 6-2, Juliana Lima. So she lost to fighters that were on the up at that time. But yeah, she has some good wins on her record. I like her in this spot, keeps it on the feet. And I think she's a far, far better striker. So I'm going Nina Ansaroff on that spot.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with all of those points. Very close fight, to say the least. Let's move on to fight number 3. We have smiling Sam Alvey versus somewhat of a smiler himself, Julian Marquez. Again, I'll start by saying this. I want absolutely no parts of this fight from a betting perspective. We see Sam Alvey at plus 160. We see Julian Marquez at minus 190. And I won't really break down this fight too deeply because Marquez is supposed to win, right? He's supposed to win this fight. Sam Alvey, he's one of those tough vets who are always going to be game. They just won't go away, right? Kind of one of those Jim Miller style of fighters. Not in terms of style of fighter, but in terms of, hard-nosed veteran who just won't go away. Sam Alvey is winless, though. In his last 5 fights, he is winless. I think 1 draw and 4 losses. Let me just pull up his record here. So again, he had that draw versus Dawoon Jung that we talked about earlier in the video. Brian Spann, he lost. Klidson Abreu, he lost. Jimmy Crute, he lost. Antonio Rogero Nogueira, he lost to as well. Don't get me wrong, some solid opponents in some ways, but this guy he can't buy a win, right? He can't buy a win for his life right now, not at this stage in his career. Only 34 years old, but his experience definitely ages him a lot more than that. If I'm breaking down Marquez, he had a pretty decent win versus Maki Pitolo. That was after a 2.5-year layoff, so there was a lot of question marks in that fight initially when that took place. Pitolo gave him everything he could in round 1, right? Marquez showed his chin in that, his survival instinct, and as that fight went on, he showed his heavy hands. He likes to engage. He showed that he can have a bit of power at any point in the fight. Although I will say his cardio, he has a big frame, so he gasses out pretty quickly, but he keeps going, right? He maybe not in the most technical or quick fashion, but in that Maki Pitolo fight, he kept going and he landed basically a late knockdown leading to an anaconda choke to win that one, right? Marquez, again, you almost have to go with him by default. He should win this fight. He has more tools to win this fight. He should be the stronger fighter. He should be able to do most of the things that he wants to do. Alvey is a tough out. Alvey, he can't buy a win right now. So you almost have to go with Marquez by default. But one thing that I hate doing is I hate betting on fighters that I can't rely on. We saw that happen with Louis Koski. I can't rely on Marquez. I'm making a reluctant pick in favor of Marquez, but I don't actually spend any money on this.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't think this is a fight you really want to bust the bank on. I'm definitely not making a bet on this fight. But let's break this fight down. We look at when we see Sam Alvey and we kind of match him up with Julian Marquez.
Hold on, let's stop for a second because I can't really hear you.
Can you hear me now?
That's perfect.
All right, cool. All right, so yeah, this is a really tough fight. I'm with you on as far as not putting any coin down on this fight. I think this fight is a really hard fight to really call. If we break down the fighters and we compare it in the striking realm, Sam Alvey might be the better boxer. He might be the better boxer, but he's a counter puncher where he's kind of waiting and he wants a counter, which is not really good in UFC. It's good in boxing, but it's not really a good approach in the UFC unless you're a really good counter puncher. And I'm not saying he's really good. So when it comes to all the other areas, remember this is mixed martial arts. When it comes to all the other areas, I think Marquez beats him in a landslide. I think when it comes to grappling, I think Marquez is way better than Sam Alvey in the grappling area. But the problem with Marquez, he likes to put on wars. He likes to really brawl, and he's not the best defensive-minded fighter. Sam Alvey is not the best defensive-minded fighter as well. So this fight, to me, can go either way. But I'm going to go with Marquez because when I mentioned the stand-up, Alvey's the better boxer. He's not the way better boxer. He's not the way better striker because Marquez throws in kicks. And I think Marquez at Syndicate MMA is going to put together a game plan, because right now he's fighting a fighter that, when you look at Sal Malvey, like, I love the guy, love his attitude. When you really take in what Sal Malvey is, he's one of the most basic fighters in the whole of the UFC. And what I mean by that is, I'm not disrespecting him. He made it this far. But what I mean by that is, he only really has one approach. He only really has one way of fighting. And it's very basic. And and when you look at Marquez, he's at Syndicate MMA. That's one of the better organizations, better MMA gyms. They're going to be training, or they're going to be preparing a game plan against a very basic fighter. So I'm going to go with Marquez here. He should have the way better game plan, good sparring partners at Syndicate MMA. He's fighting a very basic fighter. But again, I think Alvey's live. Alvey could knock anybody out. And Marquez does not have the best defensive striking. He sometimes likes to go into wars when he shouldn't. He likes to put on good fights, because Dana White dangles that fight of the night. So a lot of these fighters now could win an easy fight. You're like, it's so easy. Let me make it exciting. Let me try to get a performance bonus. Let me try to do this. They go out of their element to win these bonuses, and then they put themselves in danger in this fight. So this is the type of fight I feel like can happen. But I think if he just sticks to his guns, he's at Syndicate MMA. If he sticks to what he's good at, he should win this fight. So I'm going to go Marquez to win that fight.
Agreed, and definitely some great additional insight on Julian Marquez and Sam Alvey in that case as well. But yeah, coming to the same conclusion with that one, Marquez, but with caution. Let's move on to fight number 4. This is probably the toughest fight on the card, or one of the toughest fights on the card, and probably the fight that I spend the most time breaking down. We have Kyle Daukaus versus Aliaskhab Khizriev. Let's talk about Aliaskhab Khizriev first. He's an undefeated fighter. He's making his UFC debut. You know, you watch his Dana White Contender Series fight. He had a pretty impressive 50-second rear naked choke win in that one. Likes the rear naked choke in general. Likes the ground and pound in general. I'm going to pull up his record here so we can sort of take a look together. So, you know, has a rear naked choke win versus Henrique Shigemoto. That's the Contender Series fight that I'm talking about. Previous fight before that, a ground and pound win. You know, a few fights before that, a rear naked choke. A few fights before that, a rear naked choke. So, you know, he's definitely going to be somebody who is a threat on the ground. And rear naked choke kind of tells you something. That kind of tells you that somebody is able to ground and pound, because oftentimes those can end up being knockouts, right? They just sort of land themselves into a submission area. So, you know, that shows who he is in some ways. Obviously, good wrestling, right? I mean, good chain wrestling. He has that smothering Russian style of wrestling. He has some good kickboxing as well. Adds that to the mix. He's a southpaw. You know, good kicks from that back leg, decent jab as well. I like how he keeps his hands fairly tight on the feet. So that's going to give him sort of by default at least some decent striking defense, right? And not a bad counter puncher either. At times, in general, he times the takedowns pretty well. He lands them pretty well. Don't mind the inflated numbers here. That's obviously based off of a very small sample size from the Dana White Contender Series. But, you know, that inflated number kind of speaks to his ability to land the takedowns, to bring it to the ground. We know he's going to be good there, and we know what he's going to bring to the table. Kyle Daukaus, on the other hand, I mean, he's a southpaw as well. Southpaw versus southpaw is always going to be an interesting matchup. He presents a huge height advantage. He fights tall. He has a 2-inch reach advantage, but it might end up feeling like more than that. Decent overall fighter. I like his stand-up. I like his boxing specifically. You know, showed really good boxing combinations in his fight versus Dustin Stoltzfus. You know, showed his all-around ability in that fight. Good boxing combinations, ability to clinch, ability to use his long frame in the clinch against the cage, you know, sort of shooting knees up top to the face. His takedown defense as well, he showed in that fight. You know, this one's tough. Again, this one's tough. Big height advantage in this fight. It's going to be interesting to see that, you know, with this height advantage, is this going to be an advantage or is this going to be a disadvantage? We know that someone who wants to take the fight to the ground, sometimes a taller fighter makes for an easier takedown target. So that's going to be interesting. You know, Kyle Daukaus' height might actually work against him here in this fight. Watch Kyle Daukaus' fight versus Brendan Allen, right? Brendan Allen, we saw what he was able to do to him on the ground throughout that fight, specifically in round one. Granted, Allen ended up on, he ended up on top a few times due to like a knee in the face as opposed to a takedown. But Allen was able to control him on top for a majority of the round. Daukaus, he eventually reversed position, but he didn't really do much with it. And I'll say this, Daukaus, to me, has the advantage on the feet. He could use that as a path to victory for him. At the very least, he has the better boxing. I can say that. He can use that stand up. He can use his pretty solid takedown defense. He can possibly be too much for Khizriev from that perspective. However, in this fight, I do think at some point he will be taken down, especially with that chain wrestling style. I think Khizriev, that ground game, it's going to be better than, or at the very least equal to Brendan Allen. And we saw what Brendan Allen was able to do to Kyle Daukaus. I'll mention that one more time. I feel good about Daukaus against guys who don't have this level of ground game. So for as tough as this fight is, and Vegas is definitely respecting how tough this fight is, I'm going to go with my gut. I think the wrestling will be too much. I'm going to go with Aliaskhab Khizriev.
Okay. Yeah, this is a really good fight. But one thing you got to ask yourself is this: Kyle Daukaus versus Stolfus, that fight you mentioned, his last fight. That was the second fight on the card, on the prelim. Now he's fighting on the main event. Like, why is Daukaus, when Daukaus fought Brendan Allen, it was a main event fight. That was because of the type of card it was, and because Brendan Allen was the name, that he was the guy the UFC was pushing at the time, and that's why it was on the main event, right? So in this fight, you got to ask yourself, is the UFC really pushing Kyle Daukaus because of that win versus Stolfus? Or are they pushing Khizriev? And I believe they're pushing Khizriev. I really believe it, because Brendan Allen in that first round versus Daukaus, he had him on his heels, man. And this Khizriev guy has a good approach. I love the guys that go in there and can grapple. And I seen him do it for 3 rounds. I seen him do it in a 3-round fight versus a fighter that had 25 fights, Yasube Enomoto. Yeah, he's not a household name, but this guy is a veteran, and he went 3 rounds with the guy. He was able to utilize his wrestling, show some striking. Man, I like Khizriev here. I think he gets this done here. I think he finishes, or he has a really good performance. I believe the reason it's on the main card is because of him, because it can't be because of Kyle Daukaus. He was just on the prelims, right? So, and he was actually the second fight on the prelims. So how do you make that high of a jump, right? His fight versus Stolfus wasn't that great. And it was a good win. It was a good fight on his end, but it wasn't that good. All of a sudden, get that main card spot. So I'm going to go with Khizriev. I know the UFC is sneakily putting in a killer in the division, and that's the reason I believe this fight's on the main card. So I'm going to go Aliaskhab Khizriev.
Yeah, that's a good additional point that I hadn't even really thought of myself there in terms of the positioning of this fight on the card, and sumptuously at least who the UFC seems to be pushing. I definitely agree that Khizriev is the guy that they want to win. They love these undefeated fighters, especially from Russia. If they get any chance to have any reminiscent of Khabib, they're definitely going to go for it. So Khizriev, 13-0. Kyle Daukaus, they're giving him a tough fight again. And I think Khizriev pulls this one out. In that case, co-main event, we have Arnold Allen versus Sodiq Yusuff. How do you feel about this?
Man, I was going literally back and forth in this fight. Well, the one thing stuck out for me. When I look at Arnold Allen, I look at him as a really technical fighter, fighting out of England, but he's really technical. But I look at who he's fought. Nick Lentz on the tail end of his career, Gilbert Melendez on the tail end of his career. He fought Jordan Rinaldi. He beat Mads Burnell, a fight he was losing, and then he got a choke in the 3rd round. Amir Khani, a split decision. Yatsin Medsa, Alan Omer. So he's not fighting. He had like UFC literally was for the last couple of years. The UFC has been protecting that guy because when you really look at who Sodiq has fought, he's fought Mike Davis, Suman Mkhitaryan. Now let's go. Shaman Moraes, high level fighter at the time. Gabriel Benitez, but the big high level fighter I'm referring to is Andre Fili. Arnold Allen hasn't fought anybody on Arnold Fili's level, Andre Fili's level. And I think when you look at this fight, when it comes to the striking, Arnold Allen may be the more technical guy, but I think that even if Arnold lands 2 punches, I think Sodiq's 1 punch is more than the 2. And people don't know, but Sodiq actually has wrestling. He can wrestle. He can wrestle. This guy can grapple. So if he's really in danger, you can pull out the grappling. Arnold Allen can get taken down, as you've seen in that Mads Burnell fight. This is a really close fight. 2 guys that the UFC want to push. I guess the UFC made a decision to see who wins this fight. That's who gets the big push, right? I'm sure who wins this fight gets a really good fight their next fight. It's a hard fight when you really look at the skills, right? And you look at Arnold Allen as a striker, Yusuff's a striker, and Yusuff might welcome the striking game. And that can cause problems. But in that element, he can be outpointed and he can land the harder shots and win a decision that way. He can knock him out. And I also think he can go for that takedown, right? So I'm going to go Sodiq Yusuff. I'm going to go with Yusuff here. I think the power is going to be a thing here. And I think that he has that rest and to fall back on if things get messy.
Yeah, you took all the words out of my mouth on this one. Even from just going back and forth as to who I feel is going to win, to being 2 prospects, right? I mean, 27-2 combined records between Arnold Allen and Sodiq Yusuff. These guys are similarly sized to some degree. You know, similar reach, similar age. They're similarly ranked. I think Allen is a number 11. Sodiq Yusuff is number 13, if I'm not mistaken. You know, both of these guys definitely have a lot to fight for. Allen, we know, is 7-0 in the UFC, but to your point, you know, who has he fought, right? You look at his last few wins. You mentioned Nick Lentz, he's 35 years old. You mentioned Gilbert Melendez, he's 38 years old. You look at Yusuff, he's fighting guys that are more so in their prime, or at the very least in their athletic prime. Andre Fili at 30 years old, Gabriel Benitez at 32 years old, Shaman Moraes at 30 years old as well. I do think this fight stays on the feet, to your point. And I do think Sodiq Yusuff has that ability, or has that additional advantage with the ground game. And he could actually use that to secure some rounds. I know he doesn't have a takedown to his name. He's 4-0 in the UFC, Sodiq Yusuff. I know he doesn't have a takedown to his name, but he's shown his ability on top, or on the ground, I should say. And that could be sort of a way for him to secure what could be a close round for some of the rounds of this fight. Arnold Allen, he fights off the back foot, right? I mean, he fights off the back foot. Sodiq Yusuff, he kind of comes forward. So when you do that eye test, to your point of Arnold Allen, you know, landing 2 or technically being the better striker, or again, the more technical striker, this to me could be one of those fights where when you look at total strikes, Allen has won that one. But when you look at significant, or when you look at just the eye test of who has done more damage, that's where Sodiq Yusuff wins, just in that style, just in coming forward, whereas Arnold Allen fights off of that back leg. Again, I think it's going to be a boxing match for the most part. I think to some degree that boxing match can go either way, because Allen does present those technical advantages, whereas Sodiq Yusuff, I feel, is maybe just a little quicker, a little bit more explosive. Not to say one-shot power, but comparatively between the two, kind of has more of that one-shot power as opposed to, you know, piece them up. Tough fight. I agree with you. Tough fight, but I also agree with you in that I'm going with Sodiq Yusuff. I think this is a good matchup for him. A tough matchup, but a good matchup. Not a matchup where a fighter has a glaring advantage over him. And I think for that reason, he's going to perform, and he's going to move into the top 10 and potentially make a run in this deep division here. So Sodiq Yusuff is my pick. Tough fight for that co-main event. Definitely going to be a fun one. In that case, let's move on to our main events. We have Marvin Vettori versus Kevin Holland. Again, definitely a shout out to Kevin Holland for keeping this main event decent. We know we were in for a real treat with Vettori versus Till. But you know what? I don't mind this Kevin Holland step in. And you know what? I mean, this fight's still interesting, right? I mean, sometimes we see guys step in last minute and you immediately go with the favorite on this one. Just for the record, Marvin Vettori is minus 330. Kevin Holland is plus 260 on this one. I think Vegas is discrediting Holland a bit, obviously based off of his last fight. Seeing those plus 260 odds is a bit surprising, but obviously it is Vettori. Vettori is the real deal in a lot of ways, and Kevin Holland is coming off of a loss, so I definitely understand that. Both of these guys, they like to keep the fight in the stand-up, but in very different ways. Let's take a look at their takedown numbers first. I mean, barely over one per fight for both of them, about 45% takedown accuracy for both of them as well. So I think for the most part, this fight will stay on the feet. And what's interesting, obviously, we know Kevin Holland, like many of his fights, is going to have the reach advantage. He's going to have the height advantage. He's going to use that reach advantage as well. What's interesting is the clash of styles here. Kevin Holland is more feet first, use the full length of his punches and his kicks. Vettori is more of a get inside, use your hands first, close distance, and sort of not allow your opponent to use that length. So that's going to be an interesting chess match that's going on. Who can implement their style of stand-up better in this fight? It's going to be interesting, right? Again, that length. You watch Marvin Vettori versus Israel Adesanya, that shows some signs from a length perspective as to what could happen in this fight. You know, Vettori had a pretty great display in that one. Without a question, took at least one round from him. Some people thought he may have taken more than one, but I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. And obviously, Izzy is a much different beast than Kevin Holland, so not really trying to compare that too much. Again, it's a kicker versus a puncher in this one. I think what Marvin Vettori does a good job of doing is he has really good pressure. He stays in distance. He makes it ugly when it needs to be. I think he has a much better ground game as well. We obviously saw Kevin Holland be exposed by Derek Brunson. Granted, it is Derek Brunson in terms of ground game, but he did get exposed. He did, show that to be a really clear path to victory against Kevin Holland. And Marvin Vettori is the type of fighter who could actually implement that with his ability on the ground. I feel, especially for a main event, especially for a 5-round fight, I like Vettori in this situation. I think he offers maybe a little bit more in this fight. I think, again, he has the ability to take it to the ground or use a ground game. I think physically he'll be the stronger fighter. And that stand-up war is going to be really interesting. So I like Vettori in this one. I'm not counting out Kevin Holland. I mean, he still had 5 wins in 2020, so we still can't count him out. You would argue minus 330 on the side of Vettori is maybe a little bit too much. I'm probably not throwing this on parlays. I'm probably not even betting on this at all. But you want me to pick a winner, I'm going to go with Marvin Vettori on this.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm really high on Marvin Vettori. Really, in my opinion, and I'm not even sure these guys can beat him, but I don't think anyone can beat him in the middleweight division, aside from Robert Whittaker and Adesanya. And he likely beats Whittaker too, and he might beat the champ. You never know, right? But I think right now, I don't think any other middleweight has a shot against Marvin Vettori at all. And you got to think Marvin Vettori watched that fight, Brunson versus Holland. You got to believe he watched that fight. Everyone watched that fight, and it was pretty easy once Brunson decided to wrestle, right? So Vettori has good wrestling, not on the level of Brunson. Vettori has better striking than Brunson. So I think it's going to be a similar outcome. He's going to be out MMA'd again. And I just think Vettori's on another level. I think he's just a better fighter, and he should get that done pretty easy.
Yeah, I think you put it perfectly there. He's going to out MMA. Marvin Vettori's going to out MMA Kevin Holland. I definitely agree with that. Let's take it to Vegas in that case. So let's consider the entire card on this one. A lot of fights to choose from. We have 15 fights to choose from. Why don't we start it the same way we did with the prelims? Which underdogs are you liking here?
Underdog wise, on the main event, I like let me see here. Nah, I don't really like many favorites on the main event, to be honest. I'll be honest, I don't like any of them. And but Khizriev versus Daukaus is pretty close. It's like a 50-50 fight based on the odds. I
Yeah.
like Khizriev to get that done. But
Okay.
yeah, I don't like any of the underdogs.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that. I think my maybe one underdog pick based on this fight being 50-50 in some ways would be Mackenzie Dern plus 110 on that one. But to your point, I mean, again, I don't really like too many of these underdogs. I don't like Alvey. I don't like, Platinum Perry. Don't like Kevin Holland in this fight. Yeah, I mean, favorites are really showing why they're favorite, especially on the main card. So yeah, Mackenzie Dern would be maybe my one underdog pick. And what we'll do, of course, we'll carry over your prelim um, underdog picks in that case. So why don't we talk about maybe which couple of fights are our favorite fights on this card?
All right, so if I'm gonna make I'll give them a parlay on my end. I like Matuis Gamrot. I like Marvin Vettori. Man, he's gonna get that done. He's gonna get that done. And I like Joe Solecki.
Yeah, it's a solid.
And Impa. And Impa. I really feel good about those four picks.
That's solid. Yeah, I think that's a real solid ticket for guys that really should get it done. Not just could get it done, but really should get it done. And it's still paying a pretty healthy plus 260 on that. So we know $100 will return $361. And for
You know
our
what I
big,
would tell the gamblers though? I would tell the gamblers leave out the main event on that parlay, the Holland Vettori fight, and just go with the other three.
yeah,
All three of those, I believe, are on the prelims, right? So you can make a prelim ticket with that, with Gamrot, Solecki, and Impa, and then with the winnings, you can go in on the main event and make some picks there without the winnings. But I wouldn't put those three prelims with the main event. You don't want to wait for the main event to get paid, right? So I would just probably stick it to the three prelims that I like there.
very true. And you know what? Again, those three prelim fights, same message here. Three guys that should get it done. Not only could get it done, but should get it done. Still a pretty healthy plus 178 on that. We know $100 is going to pay 278 on that one for a slightly bigger wager. $250 will return 695. If I'm looking at sort of which fights, you know what? I'll give them a parlay as well. Let's take a look here. I do like Solecki as well. I don't want to say Bahamondes in terms of parlay play, but I do like him. Let's go with It's a little tough. I will say this is a little tough to make a healthy parlay here. I like Daniel Rodriguez to get it done. You know what? Let me not do that in terms of parlay play. I like Sodiq Yusuff a lot in this position, and that might even be just two fights that I stick with: Joe Solecki, Sodiq Yusuff. Pretty high percentage on two fight parlays. That one pays a healthy plus 149. $100 will return 249 on that one. And again, for our bigger bettors, $250 will return 623. In that case, we've given you some underdogs, we've given you some parlay action. More importantly, we've given you the review and the analysis of each fight on this UFC Vegas 23 Kevin Holland versus Marvin Vettori card. We would definitely appreciate if you guys helped us out with all that algorithmic stuff. Like, rate, comment, subscribe. Hit the notification so you know right away when we're dropping a new prediction video. We try to get our prediction videos out early so that you can really take the time to analyze what's going on with these fighters and sort of more importantly, pay attention to different trends that occur throughout the week. So again, we appreciate the follow. We appreciate the subscription. Share this video with anyone that you know that needs additional UFC breakdown, UFC analysis. As usual, this is Boxing MMA Picks. We are finished our review of UFC Vegas 23, aka UFC on ABC 2, aka UFC Fight Night, Kevin Holland versus Marvin Vettori. He goes by Zan, I go by Harris. Let's make this money.
Let's get it.